Welcome back, everyone, to the Winning Play Podcast. Alongside my co-hosts Robb Hue and Drew James, I am Kendall Capps. Boys, normally we like to kick it off with the action from this past weekend, but once again, it's already been a wild, crazy day in the NFL during the midweek. Let's start off with the groundbreaking news. Deontay Johnson is on the move. You figured there was a lot of rumors that he was going to be leaving Carolina. They finally pulled the trigger. They trade him to the Baltimore Ravens, as though that offense wasn't lethal enough. And man, does that shake up the AFC?
I don't know if it shakes up the AFC. I mean, I already had Baltimore near the top, even though they did drop a big game to the Browns this week. The problem with Baltimore is it's not their offense. Their offense has looked amazing. Lamar Jackson looks like he's headed for a third MVP. They're lighting up the scoreboards. Their defense is a sieve right now, especially the secondary. Maybe I do think Diontae Johnson is a great pickup and makes this offense even more lethal. But at the same time, what needs fixed is Baltimore's defense. I'm not ready to move them ahead of Kansas City just yet. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think in real life, the Diontae Johnson as a team goal is absolutely going to move the goalpost. I think they're looking at the past couple of years in the playoffs. And although you're absolutely 100% right that their secondary has just been a glaring weakness for this team, I also think they've looked back at the last couple of years and seen how struggling in that passing game has really shut them down from making a deep playoff run. So now, they run 12 personnel with one outside and one slot receiver more than most teams in the league. So now that'll be Diontae and Zay Flowers instead of Rashad that dropped probably 80 air yards worth of passes last night or yesterday. So, or 2 days ago. But, I think they just loaded up. The surprise, the top three AFC teams look like the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens. So,
yeah,
it was big news.
Well, I'm curious, though. So, we have everybody, just about everyone had the Ravens in that elite tier. So you guys are calling this loss to the Browns more of a blip on the radar? Or do you think there's actually more to it?
I wouldn't say a blip on the radar. Again, I mean, now I will say I think the Browns are a lot better without Deshaun Watson. I think everybody can see that Jameis Winston has been the best QB in that room and should have been starting since day one. So it's easy to look at it and say, oh, well, they lost to this horrible team, the Browns. But the Browns may be significantly upgraded now from what they were to start the season. So we haven't really seen how good the Browns could be yet. They weren't going to go 17-0. They're going to lose some games. That's a tough division game regardless. You've got a quarterback that you don't know exactly how that team's going to use them because it's his first game starting, so it's harder to game plan. There's a few trap game mechanics at place there, but I'm not giving up on the Ravens. I think they'll probably come back out next week and score 50 points and be right back at the top of everyone's AFC power rankings. And other than the Chiefs, what team in the AFC doesn't have some weaknesses or some problems or some recent injuries that we're about to talk about?
Well, and even the Chiefs, you could say they have plenty of issues themselves, but just none of them lead to L's, apparently. I mean, you're right that it's fair to say that it's a tough divisional game on the road against a team. It's a new look offense with the quarterback. I totally understand that aspect of it, but still, we've seen this defense get shredded week in and week out, and that could potentially pose serious problems. Now, the Diontae Johnson acquisition, they reportedly gave up a fifth, but got back a sixth. So they just dropped a round in drafts. I mean, I'm kind of shocked that Diontae didn't garner more than that on the market, considering what he's shown on the field the last couple of years, including to start the year this year in Carolina.
Yeah, I texted you guys. I was surprised by that as well. A trade for a fifth and a sixth was the highest bid they got. Now, he is in the last year of his contract, and, with these other bigger name receivers getting third round caliber trade worth, it still is surprising though, and the reports, none of them were really about the Ravens, but they were talking about multiple teams interested and stuff. You would have thought that there would have been a little bit higher bid for some of these teams to load up, but here we are.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a great trade for the Ravens. I mean, you can't hate on the trade at all. I don't know that it puts them over the top.
All right, well, another big piece of news that came out this morning, Stefon Diggs, the Texans, what was their number 2 receiver behind Nico Collins, who's already on the shelf. Now Diggs is on the shelf for the rest of the year. Torn ACL. Rob, I know you saw the injury, saw the non-contact, and kind of saw this coming. A lot of others, Houston did a decent job for whatever reason trying to bury the lead with this story. This could be a massive blow to an offense and a passing game that was already struggling with consistency. They've run the football really well this year, but they haven't moved it particularly well through the air, especially after Nico left. Now, without Diggs, what does it look like, Rob? I'm curious. What do you think, man?
Well, they're not even going to get Nico back for a couple more weeks still. So, it's up to Tank to really step up. Xavier Hutchinson, and I think they have John Mechie as well. But it's brutal because, their offensive line can't pass protect either. Now, Mixon has been extremely successful both in the passing and in the rushing game, but you can only go so far with that, especially when we have this young, promising C.J. Stroud. He's regressed a little bit, and now that we have a season and a half worth of games to look at, his home and away splits are pretty glaring as well. So, it's an interesting situation here. We're going to have to see what they're going to do for the next 2 weeks because Tank hasn't, while he kind of picked up a little bit last week and he's kind of had some moments here and there, he really hasn't been like that big play star that we saw last year with that dynamic duo. So here's an opportunity, though. I mean, he's going to be wide receiver 1. He's going to get all the looks. So we're going to have to see what they can do without 2 stud wide receivers until Nico comes back.
Well, and to be fair, last year on the games that Tank blew up, they were the games that Nico wasn't playing. And the games that Nico blew up, they were the games that Tank didn't play. They both missed a handful of games last year at different times of the season. So I think it's a little unfair to say we haven't seen it when they had 3 guys to start the year. They still had 2 guys. Now it's looking similar to what it looked like when we saw him blow up last year, when he is the guy. And yeah, you touched on John Mechie, the young kid out of Alabama, who is an absolute burner. He's someone that can certainly stretch the field, and that's what Tank does as well. So I think this past weekend's win against Indianapolis, building them a 2-game lead plus tiebreaker in the division, and then playing in the AFC South as a whole, knowing
Right.
Nico will come back in a few weeks, they should still be okay. But in the short term, yeah, it's definitely got to be a blow because Diggs was really starting to come on as the season was progressing. Another piece of breaking news that came in today, the Indianapolis Colts are benching Anthony Richardson. It's a really interesting move considering, he's a young guy. Normally you want to give him a little bit of rope. And he's not even coming off his worst performances. Receivers probably let him down a little bit this past week with a bunch of drops. Drew, I know as someone with some ties to the Colts in Indianapolis, I'm sure you're kind of perplexed just like I am.
It's one of the most frustrated times I've ever felt with the Colts. I just got back from Indianapolis this week. I have to say all the Colts fans feel the same way. You've got a guy who you said from the beginning, we got to get him experience. We need to ride with him and let him make some mistakes and learn. And that's not what you're doing here. I counted out of his 22 incompletions yesterday, I counted 8 bad throws, which isn't great, but he had a lot of drops. He had a touchdown called off for offensive pass interference. He had a touchdown that was dropped. He had another touchdown where the guy couldn't get his feet down. And he looked way better in the second half than he did in the first. But if you look at his first 10 games starting that he's had, his stats are almost identical to Josh Allen's. Like, there's a lot to be said that he's getting no protection. He's making plays that Flacco couldn't make because he's on the run and getting pressured, and plays where Flacco would have to throw it away or get tackled, he's making something out of it. They just, again, lost to the Texans by 1 possession, which they've done twice with him starting, which I don't think is that shameful. But nonetheless, if this team is not a Super Bowl team, which is clearly not, it may be a wild card team at best. What's the plan here for Flacco? You're going to let Flacco lead you to maybe a wild card loss, and then you're going to be stuck, maybe you'll grab a Sam Darnold next year and be average for the next few years? I've never been so frustrated with the Colts. Can't believe this take on a guy that you took him knowing he'd never played football much and was going to need time. And the one thing he needs is reps.
I'm with you, Drew. I think what that tells me is that there's a couple other things going on. The whole media training or lack thereof when he took himself out and said it was because he was tired. Now it's a bad look for the whole team. Now I felt like that was being overblown, but when you have the center coming out and saying, like, that's not the standard we hold our team to, you have the coaches coming out and saying that's not the standard. There's a lot of things going on. Plus, I'm with you, though, as far as what's the ceiling for this team. And if it's not the Super Bowl, then why aren't you giving the future of this team the best opportunity? So then you have to start looking at work politics and people whose jobs are on the line, aka the GM and the coach. So it's got to be more than just we want to try and shoot for this division, even though it is a little bit open right now.
We'll say,
I mean, that window is rarely open when you're 2 back and you've already officially lost that tie break to the Texans. You're 3 back, basically midway through the season. It'd be really, really tough for them to pull that off. And even though I agree with both of you guys that it's a really weird decision to bench him and go with the 40-year-olds when you're not really having much of a ceiling with either of them, I still have not seen anything personally from Anthony Richardson that makes me feel like he's going to be the future quarterback. And I think Shane Steichen, who has already shown throughout his career in the NFL as an assistant that he is somewhat of a quarterback whisperer, maybe he's starting to see the tea leaves already. And he said, you know what, I'm going to bail on this ship earlier than later. I mean, otherwise, what the hell else are they doing?
I will say,
Yeah, but if you're gonna bail, you just throw it all out there and then let him flame out over a year. You don't keep him hidden on the bench, because then there's always gonna be questions. You got to leave if you're gonna drop your highly touted tons of draft capital for the guy quarterback. You got to let him leave no doubt to all the people around the NFL that he can't do it if you're gonna bail. You can't just have him on the.
You're talking about a guy too.
Yeah.
This guy, he's 3 days older than Cam Ward. He's 3 months older than Shador Sanders. He's 22
With less
years old. He's
experience.
had less experience than all these guys. And I know Rob talked about the big controversy of him taking a play off because he was tired. Go back and watch the 3 plays before he took himself out, where he scrambled for probably 150 yards side to side and took 3 big hits. You tell me any other NFL quarterback that's running that much on 3 consecutive plays and taking those hits, and then tell me who's not taking themselves out for a play. And if the offensive line's upset about it, start effing blocking. Because if you're making your quarterback run side to side for 250 yards, and then you're going to call the quarterback out afterwards for taking himself out, there's a big problem. But when you draft a guy with no starts who's 19 years old, and you don't give him even 10 games to learn the NFL, it just reeks of organizational problems. Steichen is in trouble. Ballard is in trouble. Because Ballard can't go draft a new quarterback. If Anthony Richardson's done, Ballard's got to go as the guy who brought him in. And if you're the Colts right now, you're a half game back of the wild card. Like, you are still in contention for a playoff spot.
And by the way, even beyond the Anthony Richardson pick, Ballard just has not put together a fully fleshed out roster. That defense has a ton of holes in it. Ballard's very questionable for me as a GM, at least on the drafting side and a personnel decision side.
All right, guys. Well, that about covers. Oh, no, wait, that's right. There was another big move, come to think of it. It happened on Monday. The Kansas City Chiefs added a pass rusher. They traded with the New England Patriots to pick up Joshua Uche, or Uche. I'm not really sure how he pronounces his last name.
Uche Coochie.
I mean, the Chiefs, despite the fact that they're not racking up the sacks, their defense has still easily been one of the best units in the league. So it's interesting to see them make this move. But I guess sometimes, and we've seen the Eagles do this, especially the year they went to the Super Bowl, their defensive line was a strength. And what do? They added more defensive pass rushers, and they added on to a strength. And maybe that's what the Chiefs are doing right here. Or maybe they see a future AFC championship against either Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and realize we need to make sure we can get home.
Yeah, the rich get richer. I mean, a team that's had one of maybe the best defense in the NFL for 3 years, adding a guy midseason that can come in and really make it even harder on opposing defenses. After they picked up DeAndre Hopkins last week, this team's definitely all in on let's go for the 3-peat.
All right, well, and last thing, before we jump into a lot of the fantasy fallout from week 8, I think we got to talk about, did you guys see the Jaden Daniels Hail Mary live? Did you see a replay after the fact? That was bananas. I'm sure you guys saw the video from someone's phone in the field watching that Bears defender taunting the shit out of the fans.
During the play.
Little did you know the play had already started. Yeah, during the play. Like, dude, what are you doing? And you came up with an apology, but that's a big loss for the Bears. So where were you guys? You guys see that live? How wild was that?
No, I wasn't able to see it live because I was watching Red Zone, and Red Zone had already, for whatever reason, assumed the game was over, and they went through their,
Just
you
like
know how
the
they
Bears.
compile all the touchdowns for the week? They ran that whole 10-minute
My
clip
goodness.
through the whole thing. So I got the text from Drew with the video while we're watching the perfect channel to even catch it on. And they don't show it for another 10 minutes it was like, guys, can we pause this clip and go to the important one? But no, I didn't get to
That
see it
producer
live.
is in some hot water, I'm guessing, then.
Oh my God. Well, Stevenson, that's gotta be the worst film session I've ever seen for a single player coming in on today. He's gonna be getting I mean, I don't you gotta build the trust back to your teammates, because that was exactly how not to play a Hail Mary. I mean, yes, Jaden's amazing and the Bears didn't really deserve to win that game, but also I know, Jaden ran around, and yes, at the end of the day, it was him making the play with the Hail Mary, but this was a lot more to me about, the Bears defense just doing the ultimate what not to do on a Hail Mary ever, which is just tipping it up. Everyone knows you cannot tip a Hail Mary up. That's just what you don't do.
It's also unfair to say he was intentionally tipping it up. If you watch, his arm is coming forward, he's trying to swat at the ball. There was 7 bodies clustered together. The problem was no one was boxing out ground in the end zone. You need to have a body on him at all times. You can't have one guy standing 3 yards apart from the rest of the pile in case a ball does get around somewhere. That I felt like was their biggest mistake. But what's lost in the shuffle of all that, the Bears did nothing for 50 minutes offensively in that game.
Well,
and they were down 12-0. Caleb leads them down for an 80-yard touchdown drive, leads them down for a 70-yard drive, and they fumble at the 1. They get the ball back, and he leads them down for another touchdown drive to take the lead. They showed some serious gall speed for a rookie quarterback on the road to do that, knowing they had done nothing all game. And then, for all intents and purposes, they should have won, barring that collapse on the Hail Mary. Because it's not like Washington looked all that great offensively themselves. They didn't score any touchdowns on the day. But it was, what a wild scene, though, man.
Well, I would say a couple caveats to your point. Washington did have, over 500 yards of total offense at this game.
Say, really?
Jaden had 326 yards passing, and they had 170 yards rushing. They just couldn't finish drives. Kept kicking field goals.
Well, their red zone offense was atrocious.
Red zone offense was a
their
problem.
red zone offense was terrible.
Whereas Caleb Williams was 10 for 24 for 130 yards. He was having a horrible day. And then, like you said, came through in the fourth quarter and should have won the game for him. Almost as bad a play as the Hail Mary was the play before the Hail Mary to give them a 20-yard out route to get the ball to the 50. I saw since they started tracking stats, it's the longest a quarterback has ever had to throw on a Hail Mary play. He had 12 seconds, 13 seconds to throw, which in my opinion is on a Hail Mary, you always need to rush 5. Only give him 5 seconds total to get the guys down there, and the Hail Marys never worked. So the rushing 4 and dropping everybody.
Every part of it from the line to the secondary. I mean, it was exactly how not to play a Hail Mary. I mean, we could talk about he didn't mean to tip it up, or you got to box out the guy in the back, but all of it,
you need to pay attention
give the
to the
guy
play.
10 seconds to run around and be ready.
Yeah, you need to be aware when they snap the ball.
Yeah, you can't have one guy talking to fans with his back turned either. The whole thing was just horrible. Horrible from start to finish on a Hail Mary play.
Well, that's a big loss for Chicago. They win that game. They're sitting at 5-2. They're right there in the thick of it in their division. Now all of a sudden they're 4-3, a game and a half behind Detroit, game behind Minnesota and Green Bay. Knowing the depth of that division, it's going to be difficult to potentially climb up and win that. Which entering the weekend, especially at the end of that game, they were sitting in a pretty good spot. All right, guys, it's time to transition. We're going to look at some serious fantasy fallout from Week 8. Obviously, there were a number of big performances from the household quarterbacks in the league. Jalen Hurts went absolutely bananas. Josh Allen did his thing as usual. And even Patrick Mahomes had himself a decent day, even though he probably wasn't in too many lineups with what he's looked like. But I'm curious, there were a number of guys that likely weren't on rosters, or maybe you were smart enough. And I know, Drew, you had one of these guys, and I had one of them as our streamers of the week. But there were a few quarterbacks that really stood out with week-winning potential performances this past Sunday. Kirk Cousins had a big day. Bo Nix had a monster day with 4 scores. Stafford on Thursday night lit it up when he got his receivers back. And Jameis Winston, all 4 of them went over 30 points. So, Rob, of those 4 guys, who do you think has the best chance of sustaining this success throughout the rest of the season in fantasy?
Well, if you're talking about consistency and sustainability, we can mark Jameis Winston out for me. I don't really think that's part of his calling card. Actually, I'm going to go with, I think, maybe a little bit of a surprise here. I'm for sustainability for the season, I like Bo Nix, and I'll tell you why. He's actually been doing pretty well over this last month and a half, and he's around number 9, I think, in fantasy QBs. But the reason I like him is because he has a surprising rushing floor, and he's been getting rushing yards every time. And on top of that, he has a coach in Sean Payton that has shown that he stayed aggressive using Bo Nix's legs in the red zone. So he's got him doing some RPOs. I actually think that floor, especially with the possibility of rushing touchdowns, is going to sustain. And they're doing a whole youth revolution in Denver. Now, they did hyper-target Courtland Sutton for what feels like the first time all year this last game. But this was the Panthers. The defense of the Panthers has kind of led to anomalous offensive production by other teams. But Cousins would be the other guy, I would say, but when Atlanta can win with their run game, you're going to see a low floor with Cousins, and it's honestly the same for Stafford for the same reasons.
Yeah, I'd say I mentioned 2 of these guys. One was my stream of the week in Bo Nix, and to Robb's point, one of the things I love about him is his rushing floor, but in that 30-point game Bo Nix had this week, anybody know how many rushing yards he had? 4. He had 4 rushing yards. He did it with his arm, and usually there is that huge...
He had a rushing touchdown, I believe.
He did have a rushing touchdown, but 4 total rushing yards, and doing it and 3 passing touchdowns. Usually you're going to get more rushing yards than that. So even if the passing comes back down to earth, I think he's a solid QB1 now at this point. Kirk Cousins, I talked about specifically on the show last week. If he could play the Buccaneers every week, he'd be a top 5 quarterback. He owns the Buccaneers on 2 different teams. Whenever he plays the Bucs, he balls out. He's done it twice this year, especially with the Bucs kind of reeling over the injuries last week. I wasn't surprised to see it. I think he kind of continues to do what he's done most of the season, which is be pretty good and then have some games where he's going to flash on the fantasy side. But I don't know if I trust him long term.
Well, it seems like, so I'm with you guys that Bo Nix probably has the safest floor, but let's also not forget, he's not going to play the Carolina Panthers every week. And, the worst defense in the NFL, both against the run and the pass. Like, that's not their schedule. He won't see that defense ever again this year. And Matthew Stafford, we finally got a glimpse into what this offense can look like when both of their receivers and running back are there. And they finally got 4 of their starting 5 offensive line back now.
Well,
so
Matthew Stafford's not going to play the Titans every week either.
The Titans have one of the best secondaries in fantasy. They're allowing like the 5th fewest passing yards in the NFL. And not to mention, they didn't play the Titans this past week. They played the Vikings. Now, the Vikings secondary is not very good. But nevertheless, Rams offense looks absolutely legit and marched up and down the field on Minnesota all game long. And as long as Stafford is healthy, and if that, which I think a big part of this, keeping the offensive line healthy, if they keep him upright, and Puka and Cooper Kupp are there, I think Stafford is a legit top 10 fantasy quarterback rest of season. Does he have the week-to-week sustainability? Maybe there's Bo. Maybe not, because Bo is active with his legs. But the upside for Stafford on any given week, knowing Bo Nix, the week he just had is probably his best week of the season. Like, he's not going to top that rest of the year. I think Stafford might have more 30-point games coming the rest of the season. So if you are in need of a quarterback in fantasy, he's certainly one that is out there that might be worth grabbing.
That's my fault. Guys. You said Stafford, and my brain was thinking Jared Goff the whole time. I do agree. I think Stafford is a very big upside play.
Okay. All right. So another really fun talking point, and I know my wife, she was laughing at it all day, how much the NFL was leaning into National Tight Ends Day. But lo and behold, on National Tight Ends Day, tight ends went absolutely bonkers. Most catches by tight ends in NFL history and on any single day. They the most touchdowns on any day this season. Kate Otten, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Tucker Kraft, David Njoku, Laporta even finally did something this year. Like, all of them balled out. It was wild. And
Mark Andrews had a good
day. You guys
day.
think that Mark Andrews once again, 3rd straight really solid game. Like, if you think back, do you remember what the talking point was at the tight end landscape at the quarter pole of the season. It was a barren wasteland. And all of a sudden, we didn't even mention Brock Bowers. All of a sudden, the tight end position is maybe more consistent than wide receivers and fantasy points. Like, what is going on?
Well, with some of them, you've got like Otten. Their team lost all their wide receivers. Same with Kittle at some point. Kelsey, I think we knew was gonna be putting up. Pitts, it's nice to see. It's nice to see Pitt perform. Kraft is great. Njoku also lost all his wide receivers. It was nice to see Laporta come back and actually perform. But yeah, some of these things that we think at the quarter pole or early on in the season are things that settle in and regress to the mean. I think you're seeing that now.
I think the injuries are playing a big role, though, because you look at Otten, Kittle, Njoku, Laporta without Jamison Williams, not an injury, but a suspension. And then on top of that, newly, what's going to happen now, Evan Ingram, I think, is going to see an uptick with Christian Kirk. You know, it's just been a very brutal year for wide receivers. And whether teams are trading wide receivers away or they're getting injured, multiple on same teams, we are seeing a reshuffling of target leaders. You know, so while there is a little bit of a go and get, and I don't expect yesterday to hold up long term for the pure amount of volume, it is interesting to see where the targets are getting re-siphoned, and it's good to see because it's been a tough year for tight ends overall.
Well, it begs the question, though, knowing what the landscape for wide receivers have been this season with the amount of injuries and the inconsistent play, honestly, from some guys like a Devonta Smith, who has a really big game and then he completely disappears. Like, are you starting a Cade Otton in your flex over a Devonta Smith? Like, I think at this point, that's a legitimate question that you can have.
I think that's a question. I'm going with
Yeah,
Cade Otton.
until Mike Evans comes back, then Otten is absolutely going to be a target hog.
Oh, and like, I'm using Otton, but like as a placeholder, like a number of these tight ends that are performing consistently, like we're almost in a position, knowing the amount of injuries to wide receivers, which is uncommon, that I think a lot of teams might be looking at their roster saying, I have this second tight end. For me, for instance, I have Mark Andrews as my second tight end. I have Njoku and Mark Andrews. And I'm like, well, Andrews, now that I picked him up off wires, up the waiver a couple weeks ago. Thank you, Drew. He's gone, 15, 3 straight weeks. So it's like, he's certainly flex worthy at the very least. Like, and I'm sure there are
to your point, Kendall, last week in a league of record, I have Ingram and Tucker Kraft, and I ended up playing both, and they both got a touchdown, and they both got, Ingram was looking a little sketchy until the end when he ended up getting a touchdown, but, both got
a touchdown.
The Ingram, it was a sick catch. He's a phenomenal receiver at the tight end position.
One of the more athletic leaping catches I've ever seen a tight end make. Like, that was why.
He looks like a wide receiver. I don't feel like he should be a tight end. I feel like he's a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, he was a wide receiver at Ole Miss, I believe is where he was at. He was just one of those bigger dudes that was a little bit slower, but he's more athletic than all the linebackers. I mean, he's pretty much he's an inline wide receiver basically for that team. He
certainly got peppered with targets and catches last year like wide receiver. They had like 104 catches, which is wild.
Once again, when Kirk got injured and now he's out for the season again, So, I mean, I see a big uptick for Ingram the same way we've seen with some of these other guys.
Well, and speaking of, we touched on the wide receiver landscape being so unpredictable this year due to injuries, a lot of guys getting traded. We saw some unheralded guys really step up this past week. Ladd McConkey with the Chargers, he had a really, really big week, and he's been solid 3 of the last 4 weeks. Cedric Tillman, who we talked about in our waiver wire segment last week, had a really big week. Josh Downs came back to life, and guess what? Now that the Colts, as we talked about, inexplicably going back to Flacco, Downs, he's certainly got to be back on the rise. Calvin Ridley, the ghost of Calvin Ridley, is alive. Darnell Mooney, even Demarcus Robinson had a big day. All those guys finished inside the top 10 this past week. So, like, I'm curious, is there anyone there, Rob, that you like rest of the season to potentially be an every week starter?
I like what I've seen from Ladd McConkey. I almost got McConkey this week in our league of record. Luckily, I had CeeDee Lamb, pull off a miracle game. But that Chargers passing offense, I think you're seeing a slide from how run heavy they were to more and more. I was actually kind of hoping Diontae Johnson ended up on the Chargers. I thought he was more likely to go there. And I think that's another reason why the Chiefs actually grabbed Uche is they're kind of seeing within their division, I see the Chiefs and the Chargers being very similar style teams. I like what I saw of Ladd. He actually almost had a third touchdown in that game and was like 1 or 2 yards away from it. So I see him as the wide receiver 1 uncontested on that team. And then the other guy I would talk about in a different quality is Demarcus Robinson. He had 2 touchdowns in that game, and I don't see him competing anywhere near Puka or Cooper Kupp for that. But last year, as the wide receiver 3, he went on a tear like the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season. He was getting a touchdown or 2 in almost every game to end that season. So I think his problem so far this year was he's not like a wide receiver 1 alpha stud guy, but he's perfect as that third wide receiver when you have to dedicate so much attention to Puka and Cooper, especially in the red zone, that DeMarcus is kind of this forgotten guy, and he's athletic enough to make these moves and get separation. So while I see McConkey like the biggest one, I'm excited for Cedric Tillman as well, but I see Demarcus Robinson as kind of being this back-end guy you hold on your bench for flex and bye weeks and things like that could pay off dividends.
I think I agree with you, Rob, on both of those. And a guy that I love trolling Rob with, Calvin Ridley. As long as Mason Rudolph is the quarterback and it's not Will Levis, and they've been pumping the ball to him. They got rid of DeAndre Hopkins, so he's getting a ton of targets. Now that some of those targets are catchable, I think he's very startable. Josh Downs, like you mentioned, had 3 great games with Flacco at quarterback, and then nothing at all for 2 weeks while Richardson started. So I dropped him right before the games this Sunday, and now he's definitely back to being playable. Brian
Flacco's back, baby.
And Thomas Jr. in Jacksonville, I know you're already playing him. He's been a stud, but now with Christian Kirk out, they're gonna be more dependent on him. He could go even higher.
He might not even play. He also got hurt.
Yeah, he's got an
He
injury.
came back into the game
right
at the end of the game, though, I believe.
No, they said between 2 to 4 weeks, and then or he's day to day. The reports have been conflicting, but either way, he's not guaranteed to play next week.
But he's certainly someone worth keeping an eye on, and certainly
Absolutely.
I agree that he has a lot of upside. I'll tell you, like, of those guys, I do love Downs. Thankfully, I thought about dropping him last week, and I didn't. Now I'm really glad I did in the league that I do hold him. Mooney has been pretty consistent, but to your point about Demarcus Robinson, and you're right, toward the end of the last season, he was scoring every week. I love his role in this offense when he is a wide receiver 3, but he is never going to be someone that I'm going to feel comfortable putting in my starting lineup, because the second in the back of your mind, you're like, this is the week he's going to have 3 for 32. And then the following week, when you bench him again, he'll have 3 for 32 and 2 touchdowns. And then you'll start him again and he'll have 2 for 18. It's like he's that type of guy, especially when there's 2 other alpha receivers. So even though he has that opportunity every week to have that blow up week, you're just never going to know what week that's going to be. And for that reason, like, I personally would not start him almost any game, barring another injury to that receiver core in Los Angeles. But Downs is certainly, I think, among those guys, the one that I'd probably target if he did get dropped and he's on waivers. One other receiver that I feel like, there's an interesting debate having here in Buffalo. They made that big move. They acquired Amari Cooper, the veteran. He had a pretty solid first game, surprisingly, 2 weeks ago. And it was essentially silent this past week at 1 catch for 3 yards. Meanwhile, the rookie Keon Coleman had his second really strong game again, throwing rapport with Josh Allen. He had 5 for 70 and a touch. Drew, rest of the season, who do you want, Coleman or Cooper?
That's a tough call. I'm probably going to go Keon Coleman. I got a lot of questions about Amari Cooper. Is Amari Cooper still that good? He's had, 4 okay years with the last 4 years. Haven't been awful. He's been over 1,000 yards for most of them, but he hasn't. I think he's one of the lowest graded receivers on PFF this year. Hasn't looked good. Now, he's only had a week to get back into this offense. I think they'll find ways to use him, but Keon Coleman's been pretty steady, and the Bills have looked like they want to use him. Maybe with Amari Cooper there, it opens more things up for Keon. So I'm going to go Keon Coleman there, at least at the prices they would be going for.
This is a tough one back and forth. I do think Amari Cooper, there's a level of this where he just doesn't know the offense quite yet. I think, it's sweet. We can't just expect him in 1 week to pick up the playbook. But another reason why I would actually agree with you on Keon Coleman is because the offensive coordinator and what the Bills have shown they want to do with the football, which is they want to run as much as they possibly can. They do not want to put it all on Josh's shoulders for first and second down. And Keon is kind of occupying what Gabe Davis was supposed to be back in the day. He's not a great separator, but he's a big 50-50 ball, big body, red zone type guy. And this actually, it's interesting because you have Amari Cooper, the route runner, a.k.a. Stefon Diggs, and Keon Coleman, the Gabe Davis role where they stretch the field with them. So the reason why I like Keon is because even though he does have these deeper air yard targets, it fits in line with 100% with what the Bills want to do, which is what they're going to run and pound the ball as much as possible and then take these shots that Keon Coleman is best at. And then you're going to have Khalil be the underneath guy for the pseudo rushing game under passing. So while Amari's kind of learning it, I do think obviously this one catch for 3 yards is not going to be, as bad moving forward. I'm with you. I like Keon Coleman and I like that fit. And I honestly loved him when they drafted him back in the day or earlier this year. I'm excited for his future on this team.
Well, it's funny. I posed that question, and my personal answer is almost a non-answer, and it's neither. And it's not because of not liking either of their abilities. I think, to your point, Drew, there are certainly questions about Amari Cooper. His age 30 or 31 season, which normally you see a precipitous drop-off in production. Keon Coleman is still a little bit raw, and, downfield shots, the odds on hitting them are still a little bit lower. But also, Rob, I'm glad you touched on Khalil Shakir, who leads the team in targets and catches.
He's the one you want.
And then let's not forget Dalton Kincaid is, a red zone threat and is, having an even bigger impact in that offense as the season goes. Plus, like you said, they're also going to be a run-first offense. And then on top of it all, Josh Allen likes to run for 10 touchdowns a year himself. So, for that reason, I personally, if I had either of these guys, Keon, obviously, his stock is a little bit higher right now coming off the big game. Amari, if he bounces back next week, I would see if there's someone out there that wants a piece of that. Because I think there potentially has more value to trade them or package them with someone else, knowing I'm guessing the production from the 4 pass catchers in Buffalo are going to be very inconsistent the rest of the season and hard to predict.
Yep. Yeah, I'm right with you.
All right. Well, it's time to move on to our fantasy football risers and fallers. This week, there's some massive risers. Part of it due to the trades that we've discussed or injuries. First and foremost, I think Tank Dell, we referenced Stefon Diggs going down with the ACL injury. They're already without Nico Collins. And as I touched on earlier, when he was just the guy last year, that's when he had a lot of his spike games. So you got to think his stock is on the rise. Drew, you talked a lot about Calvin Ridley. Clearly, with D-Hop gone, and as long as Mason Rudolph is chucking and slinging the ball around, yeah, he's going to throw it to the wrong team 2 or 3 times, but he's still going to throw it in Ridley's direction 12 times a game. Downs is another one. But is there anybody else that you guys really like that is ascending right now? How about you, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Olave, he has an opportunity on the Saints. They don't have too many other ones, so just by pure concentration of targets, he should see a return. Now, I've always kind of been down on Olave on that team as far as what he should be that the fantasy community thinks, because as a Bucs fan, I watch a lot of Saints games, and it's always been clear that Derek Carr and Olave's chemistry are off, and I'm not really sure what secrets are in that sauce, but just by pure concentration of targets, I see him rising. And the Tank Dell is another one of these where it's opportunity. We haven't necessarily seen him pop off, but we saw it last year. And there's not really any other proven assets on there right now, Hutchinson and Mechie. But besides that, we're really talking about opportunity here more than we've seen actual production rise off players we haven't talked about yet. We talked about Keon Coleman and some other guys before. So
yeah, on the Tank Dell thing, my advice to people, I'd be trying to trade people for Nico Collins right now. All the reports are that he's coming back week 10. He'll be off IR. I'd be looking to buy low on Nico, and with Tank Dell, I'd almost be watching for him to have a big game this week and trying to trade him at top value before Nico comes back. Not that he has no value when Nico is back, but if he does put up that 30-point game this week, I might be trying to flip him for a Garrett Wilson or somebody that people aren't talking about. Garrett Wilson leads the NFL in targets, and it's not even close at this point. And since Devontae Adams got traded to the Jets, Garrett Wilson has gone back to wide receiver 1 status. I think he's an interesting one I might be trying to pick up.
And who talked about his quality of targets on this pod?
You did.
What has he averaged between here? He has averaged between 16 and 18 points per game over the last 3 weeks.
I think as far as targets in the NFL go, he's got 82, and the next highest is like 65 or something. So it's not even close. He's getting pumped the ball. So Tank Dell is definitely for the week a big riser. I don't know if I go with Olave. Josh Downs, I think with Joe Flacco would be probably my bigger receiver riser of the week.
Well, and there's another guy I think worth mentioning is Jacoby Myers in Vegas. Now, I know Brock Bowers might be the de facto wide receiver 1, but Myers, we saw him last year put up wide receiver 3 numbers for the season and scored 9 or 10 touchdowns. And with Givante, when he left, he was already getting a solid target share, and that's only gone up. And now that he's healthy again, he looked good again this past week. If he's getting 10, 11 targets a week, that's someone that you can target and feel comfortable starting, potentially even as your wide receiver 2 going forward, I think. All right.
And he was explosive with the football.
Yeah,
he looked explosive in that game. Yeah, he really did.
And real quick, a guy that Rob mentioned real quick, but I think needs a little more play, who I think will be the waiver pickup of the week, is Cedric Tillman, who got a better quarterback and lost all of his wide receiver competition and suddenly had 9 targets and 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he's a solid wide receiver 2 going forward.
Yeah. So let's move on to some running backs that are ascending. Through your Dolphins, I'm sure you're happy to see your offense come to life. I'm sure you weren't too happy to see, how the end of the game turned out and your defense fell apart. But at least you guys scored some points.
Yeah, it was a rough game. I mean, there was a lot of rust going on. I think we had 5 mishandled snaps, including one that cost us a safety that essentially cost us the game or put them in position to come back. And the Dolphins are doing what I feared the most. I think we'll lose this week to the Bills, and then we could even win out and barely miss the playoffs and screw our draft pickup. We look just good enough to do that. But Achane, definitely a starter going forward. Raheem Mostert, a guy I've been kind of telling everybody all season, wait. As soon as he's in with Tua, they have not forgotten about him. Kendall said start him this week. He showed up, 2 touchdowns. He's getting goal line carries. He might even get more play going forward. You got to be high on all the Dolphins offense as opposed to where they've been. They look like they're back to being startable for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a little hesitant on Mostert because he only had like 18 yards. So, I mean, he got saved by the 2. He did get saved by the 2, but that's his role, So if they're going to get down close to the goal line, you can't discount a guy who scored, 21 touchdowns last year. So if that's his role, then he'll be floated by that. And he'll probably also have a couple big yardage games throughout the season too.
And also Jalen Wright has looked really good, but they're not giving him the ball. And you got to think at some point they're going to start giving him the ball a little bit more, which might eat into one of those 2 guys.
More than likely, I would assume that he eats a little bit more into Achane's role. Mostert is more the ground and pound goal line back, and Jalen Wright is more similar to Achane's running style. But Achane is already a young stud. I don't know if they're going to feel they need to force it in the other young stud when Achane appears to be a beast himself. One other guy I think we have to talk about, because he essentially got dropped in a lot of leagues when Devin Singletary came back, and that's Tyrone Tracy Jr., and he just flat out said, no, I'm not going anywhere. That's my fucking job. Like, I'm way better than this dude. And look what he did on Monday night against the Steelers defense. He made them look bad. Big play after big play. He scored their only touchdown, of course, because, Danny Dimes now 8 straight games in primetime without a passing touchdown. So they were going to score. It was going to be on the ground. 145 yards on the ground, and everything looks flowery. And then he suffered a concussion at the end of the game. Now he's in concussion protocol. So for anyone that thought they found a gem or they had a gem sitting on their bench, they're probably going to have to wait a week or 2 before they can unban him.
Or if you don't have him, maybe this week you can go grab him. Maybe you can make a trade to get Tyrone
Tracy is an absolute star. He runs so hard. He looks so good consistently. And this Giants team, when they finally drop Daniel Jones, they have an opportunity to have a pretty good offense put together next year. Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy. I like their assets. So, he's an absolute stud. I don't know how you can watch him play and not be excited for what he can bring to the table.
Yeah, if he can do that behind that offensive line against the Steelers defense, I mean, I'm sold. Every time we see him on the field, he looks explosive. He's making plays. He's breaking tackles. Like, I'm impressed. I think even when, he despite the concussion, at this point, rest of the season, he's got to be the Giants starter. Devin Singletary is just a dime, I think, at this point. All right, there's a couple tight ends probably worth just mentioning. I know we touched on each of them a little bit earlier. Cade Otton, obviously, with all the receivers missing in Tampa, no surprise. He was a target hog, had a big week. Look for him to continue to ascend. And then Evan Ingram with Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas's injuries. You can look for Ingram to get back to that target share that we were used to seeing prior. All right, let's talk about some guys whose value is plummeting. And I have to start with one guy that I was so high on. And when he got traded to the Jets, everyone thought his stock was going up. And I said on this show, I was actually worried. I would prefer if he had stayed in Vegas. That's Davante Adams. Because at least in Vegas, I knew he was the wide receiver one, getting 12 targets a game. Now he's getting 6 targets a game. And 4 of them suck because Aaron Rodgers doesn't look very good anymore. He's just flat out not good. People forget Aaron Rodgers was not good before he tore his Achilles. Like his last season, he was not good. Like 2 seasons before that, he was great. But the season before, he was not good. Then he tore his Achilles. Now he's 40 years old, and he does not look good. And you're still an alpha in Garrett Wilson on that team. So we're watching Davante Adams absolutely nosedive. He's got to be one of the biggest fallers. And for anyone that traded for him when he got traded to the Jets, they are probably concerned. But there's one other guy that I think in Green Bay that might be worth talking about. And I think we were all really high on him early on, is Jaden Reed. And I don't know what has happened, but clearly Romeo Doubs has become the most trusted target in that passing game. And Reed is getting about 4 looks a game now. I mean, he was looking like a high-end wide receiver 2 early in the season. Now he's maybe a flex play at best, I'd say, right?
He's a scary flex play at best.
Now, I do see a regression coming for him, and I actually, if Jordan Love has to miss a game because of this groin injury that he has, or maybe even 2, I think they're going to want to help Malik Willis out more, and so I see more of those manufactured touches that Jaden Reed is so good at, closer to the line of scrimmage, things like that. So I do see a little bit of a regression coming for him, but yeah, it is concerning because right now Doubs and Kraft look like better plays at their position than Jaden Reed does, and Jaden Reed is like the most explosive talent on that wide receiver core. So, finally the years of the Doubs offseason hype of being the guy, it looks like it might actually happen this year, but I think it's a little too early to tell.
Personally, I don't really trust any of these Green Bay pass catchers. There's kind of too many of them. This week, no player had more than 6 targets. You've got really 5 guys that are viable pass catchers in Wicks and Reed and Doubs and Kraft and Watson, and they're spreading it around. Jordan Love continues to kind of look bad in the first half and then turn it on, but I don't know that any of these guys, Doubs did look good this week, but didn't score a touchdown. But would I be surprised if next week he had 3 for 40? No. It's kind of pick your poison, but I don't see any way to predict who's going to score each week in this offense.
Well, and I'm curious, Rob, another guy that might be about to fall, depending on how this new look offense appears, Zay Flowers. I wonder what his role is going to look like now that they're bringing in Diontae Johnson, who's a bigger receiver that a lot of times, when Lamar is rolling out and escaping and extending a play, he is just throwing it to a guy in one of those jump ball situations. A lot of times that's been Mark Andrews, but sometimes deep downfield that's been Zay Zay Flowers. What do you think Zay's outlook will be going forward, knowing Diontae is coming into town?
I'm really glad you brought up Zay Flowers because I did want to speak on him after this Diontae trade. Now that Diontae's there, Diontae at his best, short to intermediate route running specialist, gets you a lot of targets, a lot of passes, and he helps move the chains. Zay Flowers right now has been the high target guy in this offense when of an offense of a quarterback with Lamar that actually spreads it around more than most. I alluded to this earlier. They run more 12 personnel, so only 2 outside receivers or 2 receivers, on the field. more than most. So Bateman gets moved down, and now it'll be Flowers and Diontae. And Deontay's not going to be the downfield target guy that Bateman was. That'll be now Flowers. So his quality of targets are going to be further from the line of scrimmage and probably less numerous. So actually what's interesting is Deontay Johnson owners had to be really excited that he was going to get traded. But here's the thing, going to the Ravens now hurts actually, I think, the ceiling of both Zay Flowers and Diontae, because Lamar has been good at spreading the ball around. So it'll be interesting because Zay has been putting up some very good games lately with high target numbers and high yards. And now I'm looking, instead of 7 receptions for 115 yards like he just had this last game, I'd be looking for more like 4 or 5 reception games from Zay Flowers moving forward.
Yeah, I could see it going either way. I could see it having that effect. I could also see it having a Garrett Wilson type effect where it's opening up things more for him. I will say that Rashad Bateman drop was the minute that the Ravens decided to trade for Diontae Johnson. As soon as that drop happened, they got on the phone and were like, give us somebody who can catch. So Rashad Bateman is falling quickly. I think Rob's probably right. I think he probably gets maybe a couple less targets, but he may get more yards per attempt, so it may even out a bit there, and he may be seeing less coverage. So I would look for him to at least remain a big factor. But I do think it's going to be really interesting to see Lamar, who with actually 2 solid receivers and 2 tight ends, and Derrick Henry. That offense is looking scary.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens, if they get out ahead and then they can give to Derrick in the 3rd and 4th, I mean, they are the most dangerous team if they can do what they want to do.
And to your point, Rob, Diontae, knowing he's a short to intermediate route runner and a bigger body than Zay, you could probably make the argument that there's a better chance he hinders Mark Andrews' overall value in fantasy if suddenly Andrews isn't getting 3 red zone targets, but he's getting 1.5 or 2 red zone targets, which means maybe he scores, maybe he doesn't. Whereas, as we've seen for the last 4 weeks, he's back to scoring a touchdown every week. And if he doesn't, now he's just putting up those 4 for 40 games, and his stat line looks a lot different. So if you're someone like me who has Mark Andrews as your second tight end, you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be looking to move him this week. I got a couple running backs that are probably, fantasy managers are a little bit worried about. I think the biggest one has to be Zach Moss. He's one of the guys at quarter pole we talked about. Like, he's clearly the alpha. He's getting all of the work. And now the roles have completely flipped. And he is essentially a backup running back now because Brown has taken that job and run with it. So anyone that is rostering Zach Moss, he's not startable at this point. There's a couple of other guys that I have on this list that are startable, but I know I personally am really worried. And the first one is Javonte Williams. And I want to talk a little bit about him for a second. He was playing the Carolina Panthers this past weekend, and I was going against him in 2 leagues, and I was concerned because Givante was coming off his best game of the year. Best game he had in like 3 years since before his injuries. And then he gets the lowly Carolina Panthers that are giving up 180 yards a game on the ground. And he didn't really get much going. And we finally saw Jaleel McLaughlin get a large chunk of the work. He looked like the better back. He looked like the more talented back. He scored on a pass out of the backfield. So I'm starting to think we might start seeing a little bit more of that shift with some of the work going toward McLaughlin and knowing the overall, ceiling for the Broncos offense being so low as it is. If you have a low ceiling and now you're going to start a bit of a timeshare in the backfield with McLaughlin, I'd be really, really worried if I was a Javonte Williams owner.
Yeah, I mean, Jaleel's the guy I've been looking for all year. Javonte still got 17 carries this week, but he definitely was not effective with them. Like, Jaleel's definitely a guy I'm holding on to and hoping that starts to switch. I'm not starting Jaleel yet off of 9 carries and a touchdown, but I think the eye test, it looks like Jaleel should be taking over more of that role.
Yeah, I had a chance to start Bo Nix this week, or this last week. And at the last second, I had him. And at the last second, I actually dropped him for Caleb, of all people. Dan Quinn's got that Washington defense actually picking its spots now. But, because I thought, like you said, this was going to be a Givante game. I mean, you're playing Carolina. You assume they'll get up. And once they do that, they'll give it to their large body running back. But I'm with you guys. But at the end of the day, between McLaughlin and Givante, I don't see this being a ownership of a whole backfield, and I don't really want either of them. I thought Givante had an opportunity to be the guy. Flynn, best case for McLaughlin is that he gets some passing work and all that stuff, but I don't really see either now. I thought of the two backs, the best possible scenario was a higher ceiling for Givante being the guy than McLaughlin, whatever he's going to be. So I'm with you guys on the real field. McLaughlin looks way better, but in fantasy, I actually don't want either of them.
Well, interestingly, in that same game, Chuba Hubbard once again struggled despite getting tons of volume. And Jonathan Brooks, they opened the practice window, and he's going to be coming back pretty soon. They used a really high draft pick on him. Now, Chuba, a lot of fantasy managers who drafted him super late or scooped him off waivers earlier this season have been rolling in RB2, borderline RB1 riches all year long with Chuba Hubbard. Is now the time to try to move him?
Well, I think now's the time to try and grab him. I mean, they're playing against a Broncos defense that shut down Alvin Kamara the game before that, shut down most running backs all season. That's a good defense. Now, I think Jonathan Brooks is going to have an impact there? Yes. I think he's going to come back and take some touches for sure. If not, take the job. But if you've got Chuba, probably last week was the good time to move him. Now, after a down week, I don't think you're going to get much for him. You might as well hang on because he could have a bounce-back game next week. We don't know what Jonathan Brooks is going to take away. So, yeah, I don't think you're going to get for him what you may be able to get lucky and still get out of it.
I was going to say, yeah, the time to move him has already passed because since week 3, every single game has been less points. So he had 30.9 in week 3, but then since then, 25, which is still amazing, 17, which is still good, 15, which is still good, then 11, then 9. So, I mean, he's gone down and down and down and down and down, and they just lost Deontay Johnson to kind of help open up that offense. So, I'm not really big on holding him. I think you missed your opportunity to trade him. It's tough, but this is what you get when nobody wanted him in the first place in draft season. You got to just be grateful for the time.
I like that, Rob. I like that mindset.
That is
some things and be thankful for the time you had, and hopefully he's filling in for a Pacheco or somebody that you'll get back.
All right, guys, before we jump to the lines for week 9 and the key games, just wanted to touch on a couple other injuries. Jordan Love, as you mentioned, Rob, dealing with a groin strain, is considered questionable to play this week against the Lions. So groins can be really tricky, so you'll want to monitor that all week and probably plan accordingly, as though he might not be able to play. We talked about Diggs' ACL, Tyrone Tracy with a concussion. But outside of that, Debo actually, survived the game against Cowboys and came out of it, totally fine. And there were no other major injuries to talk about this week. I feel like this was the least amount of injuries that we had coming out of a week, which is, it's about time that we don't have to spend too much time on that. All right, guys. Now we're going to move on to some betting lines for week 9 in the NFL. I want to start with what is easily the biggest game of the week. Detroit traveling to Green Bay. The Lions are favored by 3.5. Like I said, Jordan Love, we don't know even if he's going to play at this point. I'm curious, how do you think this thing plays out, Drew?
I'm taking the Lions all day here. The Packers, I think, are a team that I think could be frauds. Not saying they're bad, but I don't know that they're probably my least impressive 6-2 team right now. They've beat the Colts, they beat the Titans, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Jaguars, and the Texans. Only maybe one or two of those teams I think you can hang your hat on. And the Lions are dominating and blowing everybody out. So especially with Jordan Love questionable, I'm taking the Lions here.
Are you, Rob?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to call the Packers frauds. The reason being because even with the inconsistency on offense, I do like what their defense has been able to do all year. So as just on both sides of the ball, I do like the Packers defense. But the Lions offense is just, it's unstoppable right now. They are the best version that I always knew was their best version, which is you run with the dynamic duo, Sonic and Knuckles, I guess they want to be called. I guess it's an interesting nickname that they chose for themselves. And then you just have Jared Goff be precise. And has he been precise? Yes, probably the most precise any quarterback has ever had for a stretch in NFL history, where he's really only he threw for 85 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, it's just their offense is unstoppable right now. if a team can do that, there's nothing really that you can do to stop them. So -3.5. I wonder what's going to happen if Jordan Love gets ruled out. I'm assuming the points will be even more. But yeah, I take.
He gets ruled out midweek. That line is going up to 5.5, maybe 6.5.
Sure.
And it's for that reason. I mean, honestly, even if he does play, he's not fully healthy. And maybe an even bigger injury in that game is Jair Alexander. Suffered a knee injury late in the game last week. And their second corner has already really struggled, Keyshawn Nixon. And there's a lot of rumors that Green Bay might be looking to upgrade at corner because of it. But if Jair is also not, I mean, he's either way, he's not going to be fully healthy. But if he flat out is unavailable, you got to figure that Lions offense, they're going to be chomping at the bit. Like,
Yeah.
I'm jumping on this 3.5 before that line grows more and more.
Before it
Normally,
moves,
I
yeah.
like to wait until Friday before I see all my injury reports and I make a bet. But this is one where I expect this line to go up, and I like Detroit to win and cover. So grab it at 3.5 while you can, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you. I take the Lions on this line all day. Lay the points.
All right. From there, we got another one with a pretty close spread, and it's a divisional matchup. Still in the NFC, the Los Angeles Rams, the new look Rams, now that they got their offense back together, they're 1.5-point favorites at Seattle. Seattle coming off that, drubbing by the Bills at home. Granted, it was in a monsoon. I don't know if you guys saw that. Like, it was coming down, cats and dogs, and they just couldn't get anything going on the ground against the Bills, which was a bit surprising. So knowing that they're coming off a tough loss, they're back at home again. Yet Sean McVay historically has owned Seattle. So, Rob, where are you going with this one?
You guys know I love the Seahawks. Last week, highest passing rate team in a monsoon. It was not a good setup for their type of team to even do well. But Rams get both the receivers back. I'm leading us in our keeper league, and I just got Puka, so I love that. So Puka and Cooper and Sean McVay against a team that he knows well and has owned. I'm absolutely going to lay the points for the Rams here at 1.5. I could see a big offensive performance by Stafford and those two receivers. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, I'm right with you. I think the Seahawks have lost 4 of their last 5. The Rams got their team back together. Sean McVay owns the Seahawks. I think the Rams are actually a sneaky threat the rest of the year if they keep Cooper Kupp on that team. The way Kyron Williams is playing, the way Puka is playing, even their third and fourth wide receivers making contributions. Their defense, obviously not what it was, but in that division, I think the Rams could definitely make a run, and I think the Seahawks are struggling right now. So I'm taking the Rams and the points.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to lay the 1.5 here. I don't see any reason you can put money on Seattle and feel confident right now. When they started 3-0, they had a 2-game lead in the division at that time, and they were still underdogs to win their division. You don't see that very often. The reason is because we all knew that they were not honestly a very good football team. They had beat up on some terrible teams, and this Rams team, especially when healthy, which they're mostly healthy now on both sides of the ball, is a very different team. And I might go so far as to say the Rams are the favorites to win that division right now. I know the Niners are still technically considered the favorites in Vegas, but the Rams already beat them once in a game. Granted, they shouldn't have won, but they came back and they did win. And they almost never beat San Francisco. They're healthy, and San Fran is still so banged up. But yeah, I think in this particular matchup, I don't care that it's in Seattle. That home field advantage is not what it used to be. So yeah, I'm laying the 1.5. Give me the Rams on the road. All right, let's move to the AFC. And Denver, a surprising 5-3 Denver Bronco team, which they've already surpassed their over-under win-loss total in Vegas. So anyone who took the over there, they're already counting that money. They're traveling to Baltimore. So both teams are 5-3, and yet the Ravens are 9.5-point favorites. That's a really, really big number, knowing Denver's defense is as good as it is. So, I know for me, when I first saw it, I was taken aback. I was shocked because the Denver team has proven to be much better than anybody thought, or than most people thought they were going to be. Sean Payton has certainly helped that offense, and they've allowed Bo Nix to flourish, and he's gotten better as the years gone along. But I think there's one key reason why this line is as big as it is, and it's because for Denver to move the ball and to score points, they have to establish a ground game, whether that's Bo Nix or their running backs. And Baltimore does not allow you to run the football. And if Denver's not able to run it, and we already know Baltimore, despite how good Denver's defense is, Baltimore is going to move the football. They're going to score some points in this game. And so as crazy as it is, I'm actually going to take Baltimore to lay the 9.5. I think they win by double digits.
I'm gonna disagree with you on this one for some of the reasons that you talked about. Denver right now, third in scoring defense, third in yards against defense. They have the third most sacks in the league. I think their defense is going to keep it close enough to cover that spread. Denver's won 5 out of 6 games here. And Bo Nix has stopped turning the ball over. Looks like a rookie making the progressions you want him to make. Their passing offense has been a lot better lately, going against the Ravens secondary that's been a sieve. I do agree with you, Kendall, on all your points of needing to run the ball and not being able to run the ball. I do think Denver loses this game. But with a line that big, with a defense playing this well and a team winning 5 out of 6, it's close. It is close, but I'm going to take Denver to cover.
Yeah, I'm with you, Drew. I see the Broncos coming in late for a backdoor cover. I think the Ravens are going to have the lead, and then there's going to be some point where Derrick Henry busts a big run, and it's going to be like, oh, they have the game sealed. But the Ravens defense is so bad. I could see the Broncos at the end of the game coming down and just getting some points there for you. So I'm with you, Drew. I'm going to take the Broncos with these points.
Well, Drew, you talked about the Broncos and how they've won, 5 of 6.
Playing awful teams.
Well,
Agreed.
let's see.
They have played awful
Well,
teams.
not just awful teams. Let's specifically look at the quarterbacks that they have played against. They played the Panthers this past week and Bryce Young. Prior to that, Spencer Rattler. Prior to that, they lost when they played a good quarterback in Justin Herbert. Prior to that, they played the Raiders, and I don't know if it was Aiden O'Connell or who it was at that
Aiden
time.
O'Connell.
And prior to that, 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who has looked like trash most of this year. So they've beaten essentially
And prior
no one
to that,
and no
and
good
prior to
quarterback.
that, Baker Mayfield, who looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC right now. You can only beat who you play, though. I agree it has been a cakewalk in that 5 out of 6 wins. I don't agree that Justin Herbert qualifies as a great quarterback, but that's a talk for another day.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say Baltimore wins this game by 20 points.
Wow, taking them big.
I don't even think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be 30-6. I think they're going to be motivated coming off that dreadful loss as well. That will play a part into it. I think Denver is playing a little over their skis, and Baltimore is coming off a really tough loss, knowing they're now a game back to Pittsburgh in their division. And I think for those reasons, I like Baltimore to roll in this game. All right, there's one more I really want to take a look at, and it's our Monday nighter. I'm sure, Rob, you'll have lots of thoughts on this one. Tampa Bay going on the road to Kansas City to face the Chiefs. Chiefs are favored by 8.5. And we talked about it last week. The Chiefs are notorious for not covering big lines. And Drew, you said I expected backdoor cover from the Raiders last week. Guess what? You've got exactly that. You're going to backdoor cover. So, Rob, with your Bucs going on the road without your receivers, do you think you can cover the 8.5?
Yeah, I think we can cover the 8.5. I mean, our offense, Liam Cohen, I still am just so high on Liam Cohen for what he can do. And I absolutely think that we can put up 25 points. And if we put up 25 points, I don't see the Chiefs putting up 34 points or 30, So, it's one of those things where our offense is still multiple, still really good for considering the losses we had. And the Chiefs this year are not putting up a million points. They're keeping it close and winning in situational football and running it down your throat. Now, this last weekend, their passing game had a little bit of life, and maybe DeAndre Hopkins explodes on this team. But I absolutely think that we cover the points. I still am going to take the Chiefs to win, but I don't see anyone laying the points and being successful here.
I'm torn on this one. I think the Bucs have done a good job at even keeping it close in games like this week where they should have lost by more and actually came back and had a chance to win at the end there. That being said, with the Chiefs grabbing a new pass rusher and another week to get Givante Adams worked in, and now they've got a week of tape for DeAndre Hopkins to get worked in, and they've had a week of tape to see how the Buccaneers are adjusting to no Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think I'm going to take the Chiefs here just because I don't think the Bucs are going to be able to score enough points.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough spot for Tampa Bay. And normally I would be reluctant to take the Chiefs to ever cover a spread this large with the way they run their offense. But that team in prime time at home, I mean, when they get up on you, they don't let up. And knowing that offense is looking like it's turning a quarter and getting a little bit better, and that defense is what it is against an offense that let's face it, like Jalen McMillan and that other pass catcher, Sterling Shepard, who just appeared last week. Like, they're not world beaters. Now, I do think there's a potential issue. Cade Otton's having a great season, and the Chiefs have allowed the most catches and yards to tight ends in the NFL this year. So that could be something that Tampa looked to expose, and Liam Cohen tries doing that. But at the same time, I have to wonder if the Chiefs defensively say to themselves, well, they essentially have one target. And that's also been our biggest weakness. So we're going to clog the middle of the field and force Baker to beat us outside the numbers with those subpar receivers. And knowing that is going to be a challenge for Tampa to score points, and Tampa's defense being a sieve, I think I have to take the Chiefs to cover when I normally wouldn't do that. But
check out for a sneaky name. Check out for a sneaky name at the wide receiver position for the Buccaneers, Raheem Jarrett. He came on at the end of last game and looked like the best outside wide receiver we have. So just check out for that as a DFS throw.
All right. Well, that's the games with the lines that we were going to dive into. Normally, Drew, I know you like to go down the slate of the rest of the NFL games, right?
Yeah, let's just go real quick through what we've got here. Hold on. All right. Starting with Texans at Jets on Thursday night. I'm taking the Texans here. How about you guys?
I feel like everyone's going to take the Texans, but there's no reason in the world the Jets should be 2-point favorites in that game. It's very weird. Whenever I see a line like that, normally Vegas knows something. I'm going to take the Jets.
Yeah, I'm with you, Kendall. I mean, Drew's anti-Jets stance has lasted for a while, but I'm with you on the Jets here.
I love it. Let me keep making up games on you guys by picking against the Jets. All right, how about Dolphins on the road to play the Bills Sunday morning at 10 a.m.?
Josh Allen owns the Dolphins. He's at home. I think the Dolphins' offense is coming to life. It'll be a fun game, but you got to take the Bills at home.
Yeah, it's got to be the Bills. And the Dolphins' passing defense has numbers-wise looked good, but they're a little bit like who's their competition. So I see the Bills having a big offensive performance here.
Yeah, like Kendall said, the Dolphins are owned by Josh Allen and the Bills. I don't see that changing this week. I'm taking the Bills. How about Cowboys-Falcons? Cowboys on the road to play Atlanta.
And that's a really interesting game. We should see plenty of points. It'll be one of the more entertaining games, I think, to watch. But I think I like Dallas on the road. They tend to perform better when they're away from Jerry World. In Atlanta, they have a bunch of wins against really sorry teams. Not that Dallas is very good. I think Dallas goes on the road and gets a win in a back-and-forth game.
Yeah, I'm surprised here. I thought I'd be the only one that picked Dallas, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to pick Dallas for this game.
Oh, yeah, I'm very much against you guys. Dallas was getting their pants beat off by the 49ers backup squad last week until they had a couple plays where the Niners forgot to cover CeeDee Lamb. Yeah, and yeah.
In the third quarter.
But again, against a team that was missing 4 of their 5 best players, like, they should have won that game. But I'm taking the Falcons here at home. All right. Next up, we've got Raiders playing the Bengals in Cincinnati. Now, the Raiders have looked a little better without Davante Adams. Is this an actual game? I know the Bengals is kind of a must-win here.
Oh, got the Bengals.
Yeah, I got the Bengals as well.
I'm going with you guys. I'll take Bengals.
They got too much offensive firepower, and I think T. Higgins will be back.
All right. Well, how about we move to Chargers-Browns? Big game for AFC playoff hopes.
For the Chargers. I think the Browns, that ship on sailed at 2-6 unless they practically win out.
I would point out, at this point in the NFL, there are 10 teams with 2 wins or less, and a few more with 3 wins. So, like, the wild card being 7 deep, actually, things are still open for some of these teams that look bad.
Yeah, they're not mathematically limited or anything, but, like, realistically, they're going to have to maybe lose 1 game rest of the season. I don't think they're a realistic shot. But at home, they'll be in this game, but I'll take the Chargers on the road.
And the Chargers defense is way better than the Ravens. And, I look moving forward, the Chargers passing offense to start seeing an uptick as well. And this game, I expect Jameis to come back to earth and show you the highs of Jameis and the lows of Jameis. So I'm going to take the Chargers here.
I agree that the Chargers defense is maybe a little better than the Ravens, but their offense is way worse. The Chargers haven't done anything but kick field goals for about 4 weeks here I'm riding the Jameis train. I'm taking the Browns. And now Patriots-Titans in a battle for draft positioning, possibly. I don't know if we've heard, is Drake May coming back to play yet for the Patriots?
That's a big question. Even though Jacoby Brissett played really well in relief, but that's basically what he's done throughout his career. When he comes off the bench, he's actually pretty decent. But when you're relying on him as a starter, not so much. This is a really, really tough game. I think my gut says the Patriots are going to win this game on the road and do themselves no favors in the draft.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah,
I'm taking the Patriots.
All right, well, then I'll go the other direction and pick the Titans. This game, honestly, is a toss-up for me. I don't think either of them are very good teams, and I don't even know if Drake May versus Brissett moves the needle for me. I actually like what Drake May's really been doing, but I'm going to go against you guys and just go ahead and take the Titans here.
All right. How about Commanders-Giants? Giants coming on a short week.
This is another one where the line is very strange. Washington's only favored by 3.5. You have a 6-2 football team that looks as good as they have against a 2-6 football team coming off a short week. The last 8 matchups between these two teams always comes down to a field goal. So I have a sneaky suspicion the Giants are going to win this game. I'm going to take the upset.
I love that upset pick. I'm still going to take the Commanders. I don't think Tyrone Tracy plays with the concussion, so I think that's a weapon that the Giants are going to be out on. And Dan Quinn it's not that this Commanders defense has gone from worst to first on defense, but he's got that defense playing at a higher level than they have been the last year. So I'm going to take them beating the Giants.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you, Rob, and take the Commanders. I agree with Kendall. I think it's a scary pick. I don't know that I love it. All their games are close, including the one that they played earlier this year where the Giants were ahead with 7 minutes left. But especially with Tyrone Tracy hurt and Jaden Daniels getting healthier, I'm going to take the Commanders here. Next up, we've got...
Yeah, who am I kidding? I can't take the Giants.
You're switching officially?
I like to switch. I'm switching it officially. The Giants will be in the game. If I'm betting, I'm probably taking the 3.5 points with the Giants. But yeah, what am I doing? I can't take them to win that game outright.
All right. Well, how about maybe our ugliest game of the week, Saints-Panthers in Carolina?
I'll take the Saints, but the Panthers should be in that game.
Yeah, both of these defenses are really bad. Is Derek Carr supposed to be back this week for the Saints?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take the Saints. I mean, the Panthers, their top receiver, Xavier Legette, I mean, he had a touchdown last week, but I'm going to go with the Saints overall here.
Well, I'm with you on loving Xavier Legette. I'm also with you. I'm taking the Saints there. Now, how about Jaguars-Eagles in Philadelphia?
Philly. Yeah, the Jags are without some talent on the outside. You got to like Philly at home.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Eagles here. The Jags defense is not very good, and against bad defenses, this Eagles offense puts up a lot of points. So
yeah, I'm with you. I think the Eagles are being a little underlooked right now with the way they're playing. I'm gonna take the Eagles there. How about Bears-Cardinals in Arizona?
I guess I trust the Bears defense more than I trust Arizona's offense, so I'll take Chicago on the road.
Yeah, I don't trust either of these offenses, but Kendall kind of nailed it for me. When I'm looking at toss-ups, I look at the best unit in the game, and that's by far and away the Bears defense.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Cardinals here. They've won 3 out of 4. The Bears still haven't beat a good team, so I'm going to take the Cardinals at home. We've got, I think we talked about Rams-Seahawks, so how about Colts-Vikings on Sunday night?
I like Minnesota to bounce back. They're too talented to lose 3.
Yeah, Joe Flacco makes this game closer than Anthony Richardson would have, but I'm with you. Colts have a bad rush defense. They have a bad defense overall, so I see a big game for Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, and Sam Darnold.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and take the Colts in an upset. I think the Vikings losing Christian Darrisaw, who we didn't talk about in the injury report, their all-pro left tackle, is a huge blow to the Vikings. The Colts have looked a lot more competitive with Flacco. I think it could be a trap game, so I'm going to go ahead and make my upset of the week, the Colts over the Vikings.
It's a good pick.
Which should do it for our picks of the week, which means it is time for Kendall's Corner. Kendall, what are your betting picks of the week? What you got?
All right, so last week the Jets totally screwed us against the Patriots, so it was a little bit bittersweet seeing that I'm a Pats fan, but that cost me because it cost both the parlay and the teaser. But I'm back at it again this week. Moneyline parlay of the week. Put the Eagles against the Jags, the Ravens against Denver, and the Bengals against the Raiders, all at home. Put those 3 together. You get next to even money at -105. I love that bet. And in time to tease, we're going to tease Cincy down to 1.5. Take the over in the Detroit-Green Bay game over 42.5, and also tease the over Indy Minnesota game to 40.5. You'll get plus 140 on your money. That's how you want to make some money this weekend. Let's get back to some winning ways.
I love it. Well, I think that about does it here for week 9 for the Winning Play podcast. Make sure you're liking and subscribing on all socials at Winning Play Pod. For Kendall Capps and Robb Hue, I'm Drew James. Have a great week and go out there and make some winning plays.